We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Wil Klusovsky, aka Wil Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now. Hey, everybody. Welcome once again. Today we are joined by Chad here. Chad is a multi-term CEO founder, so should have some good stories to tell us. Chad, I'll give you, what's the 20, 30-second intro of who you are and why we care.
Thanks, Will. Been in the information security industry over 25 years now, have ran a consulting company, have run various security programs for various companies in various industries. And the latest venture is a SaaS business in cybersecurity called TrustMap. And I think that is going to be some of the topic of what we discussed today in terms of understanding and running and thinking about and designing and bringing to market software.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm hoping we can shine some light on. So you already mentioned it. So, obviously, starting any business has challenges. Starting security business, I guess my first question would be is like, how do you figure out what problem you want to even solve, right? If you're looking to get into the space.
Very great question. Yeah. And, a lot of the stuff I'll mention here kind of applies to any industry, honestly. But specifically in security, we have to think about what are the challenges maybe we ourselves as practitioners experienced more than once, right? And or have seen our peers or customers have similar challenges on a given topic, given idea. And that's a great place to start. And I would say, if you have a notion of, a problem you're seeing repeatedly that you'd like to jump in and maybe think about starting a business around solving for others, it's a great place to now come up with who's your close in your network, trusted peers, past or current customers that you can speak to and bounce the idea around. That's usually the best path to kind of get started and to really vet this out if it's a real challenge that people are willing to invest to solve ultimately.
Right. Yeah. It's I actually talked to a guy earlier today. And I think everybody I've talked to, this has all kind of been the same way. Somebody's like, well, I have this, we saw that, we do this thing and then we saw this problem and we kept seeing the same problem when we do this thing. And then, so they inevitably go out and build the tool or the solution or the service or whatever it is. And then people start using it and then it changes. They're like, well, we thought we were solving this problem. So like, I guess how, if you think about it in that, as I'm sure you've seen that happen a couple times where you're like, oh, we thought this was the tool was going to be, is there a way to anticipate that? Or is it just, you got to roll with it and that's the way it is?
Yeah, there is a way to anticipate that. I would say having a very diverse base of people that you kind of run the idea by, ask them how they look at the problem and how they would maybe go about solving it. And that gives you insight and some really, good nuggets to determine, where this product should be focused or even what features it should have. And, how to solve the problem that maybe 80 to 90% of the population that's interested in solving the challenge that the idea is addressing would be interested in using so they could solve it similarly as what the ultimate design is. Now, I say that, and then I'll also add to it that things change. Things change in terms of the way the problem needs to be addressed, right? Based on number of factors, business complexity, regulatory pressures is a big one. And then, just the kind of a global perspective as well. So you got to think about, in terms of the business plan around the idea, who is this going to address? Is it a global problem? Is it a local problem? Is it a national problem? How do you really define your customer base? And is that going to be a common solution to help majority of those potential customers. And then, there's always going to be changes. People, what I've learned more than anything is that we'll have an analytic, for example, that some users absolutely dislike and other users absolutely love. And so you have to also temper the feedback and arrive at providing the data and then allow users to represent that data in a different way based on their preference. So
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I always preach to anybody who's consuming a product or a service, in that matter, to listen to the people who developed it. Because I've been at a lot of places where we buy a tool and then force it into our processes, which is not the right way to do it. It's the wrong way to do it. The right way is to go to the people who have figured out the best process and built a tool around it, and then change your processes around that. Instead of otherwise just force, you don't get the benefits of that technology doing whatever work it was saving you from doing, or whatever problem it was solving is probably not going to solve the problem if you force it into your broken business process.
That's a really good point, because a lot of times when we go into customers, they have a process that they created that was often ad hoc in nature, but it's been working for them for a period of time. And then other changes happen, attrition, or they acquired another business, or they got acquired themselves. And, a lot changes in those different circumstances. And that's where I would almost call it kind of process engineering needs to be the first discussion point, and talk about what's the ideal end state you're trying to achieve. And then take them through how they can do that using the product that's been created to help solve that ultimate end state goal.
Right. Yeah. So much about having having something to sell, like whether you're in sales or not, is about educating, right? Educating the user on sometimes a problem too, which is something I've, I get a lot of startups that'll come to me and want me to poke holes in their stuff, which I like doing. But, that's usually my first question is like, well, what problem does it solve? And is it a business problem?
Yeah.
Is it something that it makes an analyst's day 15 minutes longer once a week? Because if that's what you're solving, it's probably not going to be of interest to the CEO, who's got other priorities to spend money on, right? Like your blinky light blinking more bright than somebody else's if it needs to matter to more people than just the one.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest complaint I hear, and I'm sure I know others have heard this too, or have made this complaint, which is, don't tell me everything that's wrong, right? Report on it. Help me understand how to fix some of the problems that we have, that I already have heard from in the past or present. How do we move forward and correct those issues, those challenges?
Right.
That's how you need to think about creating any type of solution. It could be even services-based solution, but how you fix those challenges, right? And help them get to that, perfect outcome as soon as possible.
Yeah, a CISO at a product company once told me, I think it was him, who said security people were really good at breaking things, not so much at fixing them. Right.
I've heard that before too. Yeah.
It's like, being able to find your way around it, but necessarily what's the remediate, like you said, because at the end of the day, that's what you need to be, from the product side or from the services side, whatever it is, you need to be selling them an outcome, right? Yeah. Not a tool necessarily. So
that's right.
Let me ask you this, kind of in that same vein, like if you look at the market, like you had mentioned, what's your client profile, what's your market segment? Is that something you need to find out beforehand, or is that something you think you solve the problem, or does it just kind of go hand in hand?
Sometimes it can go hand in hand, but ultimately that's where you kind of flush some of that out through conversations with peers, friendlies, past and current customers, networking and talk to people you don't know, just to get feedback, like people do with you, Will. And that's how you really start to determine, okay, what are the commonalities? Are these SMBs? Are they mid-market? Are they enterprise customers? Are they in healthcare, technology, manufacturing, financial services, whatever, right? What's the common ground? And then you start to narrow in on really who your core audience is going to be. And that can also, and it should also provide feedback into the design and the architecture of the product. because the larger you go into the enterprise space, the more customizable and flexible a solution generally needs to be. And then if you go down market, and the further you go down market, you need something that is, what I like to just say that, the easy button.
Mm-hmm.
Click a few things and get the results you're looking for, type of thing.
Yeah, that mid to small market just wants security to go away, and the enterprise wants all
They
of the
want the
data
drive-through
information.
solution, right?
Yeah.
I'll take a number 2 or something like that.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Do you think, thinking about sort of that aspect of the market segment, do you think from a, just broadly speaking, in cybersecurity sort of startup or opportunity space, is there more opportunity in any one market right now, you think, or is it or yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Like, do you think there's any one more market that's more lucrative than others?
Yeah, that's variable based on the kind of product you're bringing to market, right? Identity management is picking up steam again, right? Big time. You see a lot of new solutions coming out solving that problem. And then you have your classic operational tools for monitoring and incident response. Now, that really would determine then, which part of the market is leaning in on those types of solutions. So I'm going to kind of not answer your question directly.
No, that's great.
Because it's dependent on what challenge you're looking to solve. And again, going back to that narrowing down at what your audience is. Supply chain obviously is a big one, has been for the last couple of years. I think that's going to continue to be a really big challenge, and we really do need kind of next generation type products for that.
Mm-hmm.
Solution. I see some of those emerging, especially with using some versions of AI for automation in that realm, and more connectivity to other, back end business systems. So yeah, I mean, it's really kind of dependent. From my biased view, I see financial services and healthcare, life sciences being the probably the biggest areas of opportunity. But
a lot of fintech out there now. I mean, that's really it's almost like AI. It's like a word I'm tired of seeing, and I don't want to talk about it sometimes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's focus on your market and your core, ideal customer profile, your ICP, and you can really start to flesh out what the big opportunities are for them. And maybe your original idea is, just as you said earlier, is not actually the product. It might just be an ancillary feature to the product that ultimately needs to be created.
Yeah, I think not almost there, but a large majority of people I've talked to who are in your position or similar, where they've started a business, they got a solution, and they find out people are using it for something different, so they lean into that, right? So it's like, well, let's change the roadmap because this is really what we're doing now. Mm-hmm. Which actually leads me to a good question. So how do you? Obviously, having pipeline and sales is going to dictate, what your product or service actually does. But how do you prioritize, like, between, I guess, just the day-to-day sprints and stuff you have to do to make the product better versus like innovating, being able to innovate, deliver on time, and then, still make revenue?
Yeah, the best way we've found to do that is engaging our current customers, right? So what do you like about the product? What do you don't like about the product? What features or capabilities do you wish you had available in the product? And that solves a couple of the challenges, or a couple of the items you brought up, which is you're actively speaking and engaging with your customer. You're getting that customer feedback. And if you start to see, again, about kind of recognizing those patterns or similar requests, you now can say, okay, well, this item we put in our roadmap, we've gotten, 10 requests in the last month or two based on customer conversations. This is going to bubble up towards the top. It's going to be maybe not in the next sprint, but the following sprint. And that is a self-fulfilling process with your relationship with the customers. And what that can do, if you now, hey, we talked about this 2 months ago, here's that capability that we talked about, it creates a lot of credibility. and creates even hype with your current customers. And you can also leverage that for their use cases to then go and share that with prospects that you're currently talking to. So balancing that becomes a natural process if you kind of build it into the customer engagement side, but also the product roadmap side, and revisit those priorities with your development team on a very regular basis.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm a big, as someone who's worked in product on the product side of the house, like very much like that's to me is still very much a client facing part of the organization, or it should be, or you should have somebody in that team that's doing that and having that those conversations. Let me ask you, kind of adjacent to that, how important is it to be, and I know this is probably going to depend on what you're doing exactly to anybody listening, but how important is it to be different, quote unquote, better than your competition?
Well, that's extremely important, obviously. And it comes down to what is the challenge you're solving, how are you solving it more efficiently, more fully. I mean, use different adjectives here to kind of to describe this, right? But it's very important, and you need to, that's, I would say, is the biggest challenge in, broadly speaking, in the cybersecurity industry.
Agreed.
Literally thousands of products, literally thousands. Like, what is the number? 4, 5, 8,000. I've heard kind of in between those two numbers, depending. And I would gather back of the napkin at a very aggregate level, there are 10 to 12 messages being used by thousands of those companies, at least at a high level, right? And then you start to drill down and say, okay, now how are these different? So if you're a customer, how do you differentiate who you talk to? So I would say getting very clear on the value proposition for differentiation is probably the most important thing. And that ties back to who is your ideal customer and what kind of challenges are you really focusing in on to solve for them. And it can't be, 5 to 10 different challenges you're going to solve. It has to be, very specifically, 1 to 3.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And that's I get into the space where I like, which is on the product marketing side of it, which is a lot of startups I see, I'll immediately ask for, let me see your marketing content. Like, how are you pitching yourself? And most of the time it's wrong, because they're talking again about the blinky lights and not
charged.
Yeah, no. Right. But it's not, because then I get the help, and you just call me and I can help you do your GTM work. But I think I asked the question because, especially somebody who spent a lot of time in services, man, the differentiators are not always there, right? Sometimes you are just the other product. Like you said, there's 4,000 different products out there. There's so much overlap. And on a client side, it's very easy for me to be like, well, there's these 4, they're all going to work. They're all going to give me what I need, right? It's like, do I want the BMW or the Mercedes? Like, what's the difference, right? So
that's when you have to get into kind of that second, third, fourth tier of evaluation to really figure out, what, number one, what is the customer trying to solve? And maybe products 1 and 2 can do that, but do they do that really well to solve, the 3 or 4 kind of ideal outcomes, right? And to think about it in terms of what are the other initiatives or key business objectives that the business is, the customer is looking to achieve. How does it tie into with other IT initiatives? Is this going to be a solution that will last, let's say 3 to 5 years, right, based on their current roadmap, the company's current roadmap, IT's current roadmap, security's roadmap, that should dovetail into all of that. That's where it gets really into, kind of a consulting sale, and really helping the customer see through, the future, not just solve an immediate need today, right? So it's not just a patch today. It's going to be a solution that can help them sustain and manage for, at least the next few years.
I think that's key for everybody to kind of understand that too, because one, that's going to help build your your ICP, your client profile, a lot better and refine it, which will then can help you can then do more targeted, I don't want to say marketing, but that's really what it is. You could, more account, targeted account planning, better sales enablement with your sales team on, hey, here's exactly the conversation. Like you said, there's going to be consultative selling in a lot of those cases. If your product is just like everybody else's and it's just on some big resellers list, and it's just a matter of who gets the most points off, it's going to be hard to be successful. So that channel, to me, that channel relationship's really important too, from the sales side of the house. So
yeah, well, that's another topic too, that it's making sure that if you do have a channel sales program, model, that those people talking about your product understand how it is going to help the customer solve their challenges, right?
Yeah.
At least initially. I mean, at a high level, then the product team themselves can get into a little bit more detail of going and laying out that plan.
Yeah, I'll give some free advice to everybody listening. That's, your channel, the whole reason channel is so important is because every one of them is going to be different. The way a reseller from a VAR rep is going to sell your product is going to be very different than the services team or the product team, and you have to be pitching that to them differently even, right? So somebody, if I'm working in services, I don't really care about the product sale most of the time, unless it means that I can sell more services, right? Yep. And so as a company who's making a product, you need to understand that and position your tool to help them sell more services. And then, like you said, educate them on the right ways to talk about it and show the value and all that stuff. So
yeah, I think what you said there and what we've been talking about on this topic is really about understanding where your customer is coming from. That could be a direct customer or it could be a channel partner. And understanding what their goals are is really, that's kind of sales 101 ultimately. And it's a little bit about product marketing at the same time. So,
well, let me ask you that too. While we still got a minute here, because you mentioned when spinning up the company, I think in my opinion, a lot of people probably bring on the sales guy pretty soon early on, but I think a lot of them don't. I've talked to a couple of companies selling lots of stuff who called me up because they wanted to build a sales program now, right? Even though they've been around for years or decades, so I guess, how do you decide when and, what kind of sales structure you're going to use, when you're going to bring on those people, and how to scale that out?
Really good question. And, advice that I will give and also what, good investors will give these companies is that the founding team, right, whether it be the current CEO, whatever their titles are, it really doesn't matter. Let's just call it the founding team, need to be the ones to build the initial revenue base and build the initial momentum. And I think it's great if you're talking to some companies, startups that are ready to build their sales program out, because that means they've obviously have tested the waters, refined their messaging, have a real product people are willing to pay for. And that's at that time, once it becomes repeatable, right? Looking again at those patterns, now you can bring in a sales organization and be able to execute and repeat that process, training that whoever those salespeople might be on how to do it, what the messaging is, who to look for, who to target, who to speak to. Obviously, leveraging the network. All of those elements go into it.
That makes sense. Have your stuff together first. I appreciate that.
Yeah, define it.
Great chatting with you. Where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
LinkedIn mostly. Yeah. So, Chad Boeckmann, last name Boeckmann, first name Chad. Search for me. You'll find me there.
Outstanding. Well, thanks for your time, man. It's been great.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Will. Always good talking with you.
See y'all later.
Yeah.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcast. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.